everyone, welcome back to Bookish Nook. I know it's been a while since I've posted a video, but the holidays sort of took up all of my time. But the next few days and weeks I'm going to be posting a lot of videos, so check out for that. But today I'm going to be talking about my top 5 most disappointing books of 2014. So by disappointing, I mean books that I had high expectations or some sort of expectations for and let me down. I'm not saying that these books were the worst books of 2014, not by a long shot, but they were the ones that disappointed me the worst. So coming in at number 5, I have Witches of East End by Melissa de la Cruz. This is a book about a family of witches who have been sort of ostracized and are not supposed to use magic and start using magic, and then a bunch of chaos sort of ensues from there. What I found most disappointing about this book was that about all of the book until the last ending sequence was amazing. I loved it. It was fantastic. But the ending sequence was incredibly complex and confusing. It wasn't explained properly, and the mythology that the author decided to include was incredibly unclear, and the backstory of the characters throughout the book was unclear, and that was a big part of the ending. So tying it all together was a big job, and I don't think the author accomplished it, because by the end of the book I felt frustrated and confused because it wasn't explained properly. I ended up giving this a 3-star because I loved about more than 3/4 of the book. It was just the ending sequence that really ruined it. Coming in at number 4, I have Take a Chance by Abby Glines. This is part of the Rosemary Beach series. This follows new characters Grant and Harlow, and when they were first introduced in the previous books, they seemed like very interesting and complex characters, so I couldn't wait to get their story. But after reading this book, I was incredibly disappointed. This book actually put me in an Abby Glines reading slump because of how awful it was, at least in my opinion. I was expecting so much more from it, and Abby Glines really didn't give her usual Abby Glines sort of writing performance. So what really kills it is pretty much the first few pages. It switches from past to present, back to past to present, etc., which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it really left me feeling disconnected from the characters and the storyline as well. What also really bugged me was the actual characters. So Grant and Harlow were incredibly annoying. You know, obviously they're supposed to have some sort of issue to overcome, but Grant was just, it was just sort of like, grow up, how old are you and you cannot face your feelings? Like, this is a little pathetic. I just felt like it was a sort of ripoff of Blair and Rush's story, in the sense that it was pretty much the same thing, except Harlow and Grant were a lot more annoying. Coming in at number 3, I have The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. Now before everyone gets their sort of pitchforks and sort of hunts me down, let me just explain that I picked this up simply because of all the hype around it, especially here on BookTube. It just sort of blew up at one point during this year, and I finally found it for a super cheap price because I wasn't going to pay $25 for a book that is a little bit over 100 pages. I went in this knowing absolutely nothing about the plot, and I really enjoyed the setup for this book. So the prologue. You know, the man goes back to his childhood home for a funeral and sort of rediscovers his memories. And Neil Gaiman's writing is top-notch. Probably some of the best writing that I've read all year, and I loved it, except the actual plot and the pacing left me feeling like I was cheated out of my time, because the actual plot is just, I didn't connect with it, I didn't like it, I didn't think it was interesting, I didn't think it was clever, I didn't think it was anything. I just thought it was pretty shitty. And the actual pacing was all over the place. You know, there would be moments where I just couldn't stop reading, and then there were moments where I kept putting the book down to do something else because it was so boring and so slow. And a book this small shouldn't be able to do that. I should have been able to read this in one sitting, no problem, and it took me multiple sittings. I ended up giving this a 2-star rating. Coming in at number 2, I have Salvage by Alexandra Duncan, which is probably one of my most disappointing books of the year. So Salvage was described as a young adult feminist space book, and when I heard that, I couldn't wait to pick this up. And then on top of that, it was described as The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood meets Across the Universe by Beth Revis. 2 of my absolute favorites. So I went into this naturally with high expectations and came out feeling so annoyed, angry, frustrated, let down, everything. A book this size should not make me feel all those things, all this hatred towards this book, and I can't believe I actually paid full price for this. The first maybe 100 90 pages are the most interesting and have the most potential. All the feminist themes are present, the story is interesting, the characters are interesting, and then the author takes the story in a completely different direction, and I don't know why she did that because the rest of the story is awful after that. It held so much promise in the first 100 pages and then just sort of let you down as you realize where the story is going. The feminist themes fall away there too, and that's what I was most exciting for. The main character sort of goes through a feminist transformation, but she fights it every step of the way, and at the end she's barely different than what she was at the beginning, and it was just awful. The world building in this book is pretty shitty too as well. The most interesting part of the book was built slightly better than the rest, but I really wish she could have expanded on it. And my number one most disappointing book of 2014 is also one of my controversial because it seems like I am the only one who didn't like this book, and that is Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. What I really didn't like about this book was the pacing. You have 3 books, the 3 previous books were super fast paced, exciting, there's always something happening, and then you have Heir of Fire where the pacing is brought to an almost standstill, and there were so many moments when I had to put this book down because nothing was really happening, I wasn't interested, my mind kept wandering while I was reading, so I had to reread multiple pages, and it was just the pacing really killed it for me. The characters too. The introduction of the new characters was done well and they were well conceived, well developed. However, every time the character of the witches came up, I had to put the book down because I hated their storyline, I hated everything about them, and I think that Maas waited too long to make the reader feel empathy towards them, so by the time their story ended in this book, and the big reveal happens, the big event, I felt nothing towards it. I was just happy that their storyline was done and I could move on. The ending sequence of this book is by far the best part of this book. It's amazing. I will definitely reread the ending sequence, but I will never ever reread this book in its entirety again because I just did not like it at all. I did end up giving this book a 3 stars because the ending sequence really saved the book for me near the end, but it still was incredibly disappointing. So these are my most disappointing books of 2014, and as I mentioned earlier, they are disappointing and not the worst books I read at all. They do have some redeeming qualities to them, however, the negative qualities definitely outweighed the positive ones. So let me know down below what are some of your most disappointing books of 2014. Thanks for watching. Bye.